All right, there we go. We got sound and everything.
But it was, we didn't get technologically sound until COVID made us.
Yeah. All right, good morning.
Good morning.
This week we
Shabbat
come together and
shalom.
we're going to do Parasha, a double portion actually, Parasha Behar, which means on the mountain, and Behar-Bechukoai, which means in my statutes. On the screen here, this is Smart Art by a lady named Sheila Nimton.
Looks sort of like an amoeba.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure it out.
But it's going to blow up here in a minute.
It's going to blow up?
Yes.
Okay.
And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I hear footsteps.
Okay, in Behar, Parasha Behar, on the mountain, opens differently than other Parasha in that the book of Vayikra and other Parashas, God speaks to Moses. It's in the tent of meeting from between the wings of the golden cherubim atop the Ark of the Covenant. In Parasha Behar, we are told, the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them." This leads us to believe a few things. Either Moses is suddenly back at the top of the Mount Sinai. This is out of chronological order. Or Moses is now revealing to the Israelites for the first time something new that God told him when he was atop Mount Sinai. In our second portion, Bechukoai, the final chapter of the book of Vayikra. Y'all know at the end of this we'll be saying, be strong, be strengthened, correct?
Wow.
Okay.
Amazing that we're at the end.
Yes. And then next week we'll be in Bamidbar, or Numbers. Final chapter in the book of Vayikra is a continuation of Parasha Behar, with Moses revealing the last bit of information from this conversation with God upon receiving the second set of tablets atop Mount Sinai, Behar Sinai. In Bechukoai, by my decrees, God promises the Israelites that if they follow his statutes and observe his commandments, then the promised land he will bless them with plentiful harvest, timely rain, security, peace, military triumph, fertility, and growth, the removal of wild beasts, and his presence in the sanctuary where he will dwell in their midst. God then reminds the Israelites he is one who freed them from slavery. Join me in the blessing. Whoops, not yet. I'm a slide too far. All right, the summary of what we're looking at here is in Behar, you have the instructions concerning the Shemitah and the Yovel, the sabbatical and Jubilee year. Limits on debt servitude. And he reminds us to keep God's Sabbath and reverence his sanctuary. These principles in Behar on the mountain, something to consider is where did Adam come from? He came from the dirt, so the land has commands just as we have commands. The Torah applies to the land. Proverbs 8:29 tells us God set boundaries so the seas would not transgress his command. He is the creator, he is smarter than we are, and he knows how his creation works. In Bechukoai, there's blessings for Torah obedience, curses for disobedience, and vows. Blessings if you do and curses if you don't. While we can drift into blessings being wealth, possessions, and status, it may be a little more along the lines of if we take a little more lines in an analogy is if we take a Prius off-road, it might be fun for a little bit, but it's not going to last due to the misuse. We're going to abuse that thing and it's going to destroy its purpose. It's not going to be any good for us. All right, now join me in the blessing. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us in his commandments, and commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. And in Hebrew, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu le'asok b'devarei Torah. All right, Proverbs 15:8-10. The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is acceptable to him. The way of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but he loves him who pursues righteousness. There is severe discipline for him who forsakes the way. In Proverbs 28:4, those who forsake the law praise the wicked, but those who keep the law strive against them. And 28:9. If one turns his way from hearing the law, even his prayer is an abomination. I'll read the first one. Yahweh spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land that I give you, the land shall keep a Sabbath to Yahweh. For 6 years you shall sow your field, and for 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruits. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath, a solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to Yahweh. You shall not sow your field, prune your vineyard. You shall not reap what grows of itself in your harvest, or gather the grapes in your undressed vine. It shall be a year of solemn rest for the land. The Sabbath of the land shall provide food for you, for yourselves, and for your male and female servants, and for your hired worker, and the sojourner who lives with you, and for your cattle, and for the wild animals are in the land. All its yield shall be for food. You shall count 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the time of 7 weeks of years shall give you 49 years. And you shall sound a loud trumpet on the 10th day of the 7th month on the Day of Atonement. You shall, on the Day of Atonement, you shall sound the trumpet throughout your land. And you shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all of its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, when each of you shall return to his property, and each of you shall return to his clan. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. In it you shall neither sow nor reap what grows of itself, nor gather the grapes from undressed vines, for it is a jubilee, it shall be holy to you. You may eat the produce of the field. In this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to his property, and if you make a sale to your neighbor, or buy from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. You shall pay your neighbor according to the number of years after the Jubilee, and he shall sell to you according to the number of years for crops. If the years are many, you shall increase the price. If the years are few, you shall reduce the price, for it is the number of crops that he is selling you. You shall not wrong one another, but you shall fear your God, for I am Yahweh your God. Therefore you shall do my statutes and keep my rules and perform them, and then you will dwell in the land securely. All right, how many years were farmers allowed to work the land before it must lie fallow?
6.
6 years. The 7th was a Shemitah year. I just answered the question. What's the 7th year called? A Shemitah. What's analogous, I'm not going to get that word out, the Sabbath day when we rest from our normal pursuits. And it said that the land would have a Sabbath to Yahweh, so it's just like us. How do you determine the sabbatical year? This has some tradition in it, looks like it. You take the current Jewish year and divide it by 7. If there is no reminder, it is a Shemitah year. A remainder, if there's no remainder, it is a Shemitah year. Otherwise, it is not. The date for the new Jewish year is Rosh Hashanah on Tishri 1 in the fall. What are you allowed to do with the stuff that grows all by itself?
You can eat it.
You're allowed to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I was reading through this time, I was kind of curious if that wasn't. I know that you can eat yourself, but I was curious if that wasn't also a demonstration of the apostles rubbing the grain between their fingers. Because if it was the year of Jubilee and the Shemitah and all that, and they were still doing it, he was eating of the food, not taking it and harvesting it for going out and making money, right? How did the people survive in the 7th year if they could not harvest from the land?
They better be prepared. Because if not, they're in trouble. Or have great neighbors.
Well, blessings if you obey, right? God promised the harvest from the 6th year would sustain them for 2 years. The Israelites were to count 7 weeks of years, or 49 years, and then to declare what?
Jubilee.
A Yovel, or Yaval. It's translated as a Jubilee year. I don't know if you guys watch a whole lot of Brad Scott. I do. When he talks about Yovel or Yabal, he says in the Paleo, it's a Yod, a Bet, and a Lamed, which when you go look at it, it's lead by the hand to the house. So God's always trying to get his people to come back to his word, right? Lead by the hand back to the family. Which holiday do you sound the trumpet for Jubilee?
Trumpets.
On Yom Kippur,
Yom Kippur.
the Day of Atonement.
Okay.
So the Jubilee is announced at the Day of Atonement. Lots of questions. Since it's a double, I'm going to breeze through a few of these. If a person was forced to sell his land because of poverty, did he have to wait until the Jubilee year to get it back?
Since he paid it off before then, but he
Yeah.
didn't.
Well, he didn't have to wait. If he came in or went and
He did the
made
right
his
thing
own,
and paid it off.
he could purchase it back. But it was to be released to him
Can the money be turned up a little bit? Galo's asking him
in the Jubilee year.
on the check. If it can't be, it's just her machine.
I can try that. How does that sound?
Okay.
And it's going to take 10 seconds or so for her to get it.
Okay. Oops.
Something that was some other folks that was during their commentaries were talking about this. If they followed this with the whole thing that we were dealing with today, where you have the whole tax the rich thing and all that thing going on, if we followed this, they had to release it every 50th year, so we would never get to the point where it would prevent greed just in and of itself. There wouldn't be like such a small minority that has
accumulate
everything and starts charging everybody interest, which they're not supposed to do to live, basically.
Or the 10% that do all the work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and then the paying for, whenever they paid, they also paid for the crops, not for the land, because who's the land belong to?
Yahweh.
Belongs to God. All right, number 2. Any volunteers to read number 2? Or
I can read it.
thank you.
19 through 28.
Yes, ma'am.
Then the land will yield its produce, so that you can eat your fill and live securely on it. But if you say, what are we going to eat on the 7th year? If we do not sow or gather in our crops, then I will so order my blessing for you in the 6th year, that it will bring forth the crop for 3 years. When you are sowing the 8th year, you can still eat old things from the crop, eating the old until the 9th year, when its crop comes in. Where was this read to? 28. The land, moreover, shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine. For you are but aliens and sojourners with me. Thus, for every piece of your property, you are to provide for the redemption of the land. If a fellow countryman of yours becomes so poor he has to sell part of his property, then his nearest kinsman is to come and buy back what his relative has sold. Or in case a man has no kinsman, but so recovers his means as to find sufficient for its redemption, then he shall calculate the years since its sale and refund the balance to the man to whom he sold it, and so return to his property. But if he has not found sufficient means to get it back for himself, then what he has sold shall remain in the hands of its purchaser until the year of Jubilee. But at the Jubilee it shall revert, that he may return to his property.
I had inserted a question from the previous one, but any history buffs in here? Does anybody know what verse is on the Liberty Bell? It's Leviticus 25:10, when it talks about declaring liberty. The first, and I believe I was trying to chase down. I don't know if I got down specifically to it, but Leviticus 25:10, I believe, is the first time that you see the word Jubilee. So you get that first occurrence in there, and I found it wildly amazing that the Liberty Bell has some Leviticus on it.
Yeah.
All right, if a person sold it, I think this is out of order to the next. Let me back this up one. I already asked that question. Okay, we'll read number 3. If a man, you gonna do it? Go ahead.
Okay. If a man sells a dwelling house in a walled city, he may redeem it within a year of its sale. For a full year, he shall have the right of redemption. If it's not redeemed within a full year, then the house in the walled city shall belong in perpetuity to the buyer throughout his generations. It shall not be released in the Jubilee. But the houses of the villages that have no wall around them should be classified with the fields of the land. They may be redeemed, and they shall be released in the Jubilee. As for the cities of the Levites may redeem at any time the houses in the cities they possess. And if one of the Levites exercises his right of redemption, then the house that was sold in a city they possess shall be released in the Jubilee. For the houses in the cities of the Levites are their possession among the people of Israel. But the fields of pasture land belonging to the cities may not be sold, for that is their possession forever. If your brother becomes poor and cannot maintain himself with you, you shall support him as though he were a stranger and sojourner, and he shall live with you. Take no interest from him or profit, but fear your God, that your brother may live beside you. You shall not lend him your money at interest, nor give him your food for profit. I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God.
Thank you. If a person sold his house in a walled city, would he get it back during the Jubilee year? It's kind of it depends, not necessarily. The law of return applied only to the land, not to houses inside the walled cities, which were redeemable only 1 year after the date of sale. As he was reading this, something that came to mind with that right there is something that the land does that the city does not. It's produce fruits, right? Because that's what the whole story is about, producing fruits. Were the Levites allowed to sell their land? No, they were not. Although they could sell and later redeem their houses at any time. Their house they could sell, but again, the land surrounding the cities outside the wall, they couldn't do it. Can someone sell their land and forever waive the right to buy it back?
I don't think so. Not supposed to.
No, because the land doesn't really belong to them, it belongs to God. We are strangers and sojourners with Him, right? And that is something else that struck me pretty hard here. Is God sees them as strangers and sojourners with Him. That's how He treats them as strangers. So, coming out of that, I'd say that we are supposed to treat others as God treats. Excuse me. All right, Genesis 12:7. Then the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. In Genesis 15:18 through 21. The Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. In Genesis 17:7 through 8. And I will establish my covenant between you and your offspring after you throughout your generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you, and I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. All right, he's got Leviticus 25:23 and Jeremiah 2:7 here. Redemptions of property. The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. These are all going over what we've discussed. The whole land belongs to God. For you are strangers and sojourners with me. In Jeremiah 2:7, and I brought you into a plentiful land to enjoy its fruits and its good things. But when you came in, you defiled my land and made my heritage an abomination. What did that lead to?
They're not getting kicked out of the land.
Yeah, their disobedience in the land. The land will vomit you out, right?
Mm.
are we supposed to charge interest whenever we, to our brothers? No.
Isn't that funny how the Jews are the best bankers, but they don't, I guess they don't do it to each other, maybe. Do they, honey?
I saw, it's funny you mentioned that, and I don't know why I thought about it while we were doing service today, but a fellow named Joseph Shulam, when he was talking about Messiah and his interactions and why there was such an uproar about his presence, because you can do anything you want to, but don't take away their business, right? You can harm them any way you want, but you start getting in their business, it gets ugly bad.
Well, maybe they don't charge each other. I didn't think of that.
Does somebody read number 4?
I will.
Thank you.
If your brother becomes poor beside you and sells himself to you, you shall not make him serve as a slave. He shall be with you as a hired worker and as a sojourner. He shall serve with you until the year of the Jubilee. Then he shall go out from you, he and his children with him, and go back to his own clan, and return to the possession of his fathers. For they are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as slaves. You shall not rule over him ruthlessly, but shall fear your God. As for your male and female slaves, whom you may have, you may buy male and female slaves from among the nations that are around you. You may also buy from among the strangers who sojourn with you, and their clans that are with you. You have been born in your land, and they may be your property. You may bequeath them to your sons after you to inherit as a possession forever. You may make slaves of them, but over your brothers, the people of Israel, you shall not rule one over another ruthlessly. If a stranger or sojourner with you becomes rich, and your brother beside him becomes poor and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner with you, or to a member of the stranger's clan, then after he is sold, he may be redeemed. One of his brothers may redeem him, or his uncle or his cousins may redeem him, or a close relative from his clan may redeem him. Or if he grows rich, he may redeem himself. He shall calculate with his buyer from the year when he sold himself to him until the year of Jubilee, and the price of his sale shall vary with the number of years. The time he was with his owner shall be rated as the time of a hired worker. If there are still many years left, he shall pay proportionately for his redemption some of his sale price. If there remain but a few years until the year of Jubilee, he shall calculate and pay for his redemption in proportion to his years of service. He shall treat him as a worker hired year by year. He shall not rule ruthlessly over him in your sight. And if he is not redeemed by these means, then he and his children with him shall be released in the year of Jubilee. For it is to me that the people of Israel are servants. They are my servants, in whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh your God. You shall not make idols up for yourselves, or erect an image or pillar, and you shall not set up a figured stone in your land to bow down to it, for I am Yahweh your God. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am Yahweh.
If a fellow Israelite became destitute, what's the duty of his neighbor? To hire him as a respected servant. In the English translation, there's a bunch that's slave all the time, and I've had some impacts with my own daughters. It's, well, the Bible says slavery. When you walk back and teach them it's not really slavery, they a lot of times become family and want to stay, right? You're supposed to treat them as part of the family. You're just hiring them so that they're not sitting idle and not eating. All right, some reasons for the mitzvah of Shemitah. And mitzvah means command. To give the land a chance to become rejuvenated, just as a father rested on the seventh day and was refreshed. To give farmers a chance to exercise faith in God's provision. To enable farmers to study Torah or pursue other things. To testify, like Shabbat, that God is creator.
You know, I'd like to say something about the land, what we learned from back during the days of the Dust Bowls and stuff like that. They did not let the land rest. They overworked it. And that's what the results were, is, you know, the dust storms that came along, and like we see today, it was not a good scene.
Right. That's some of the things you're hitting on. That's some of the things that I remember as we were discussing the plagues not long ago when we were
Right.
talking on a Wednesday night. We were talking about the plagues and the argument over supernatural versus natural. Right. I've always been. I mean, since God designed it and He commands it, wouldn't it tend to look natural, even though supernaturally He commanded?
Yeah.
I think in my head, I kind of think that's a little bit of how He hardened Pharaoh's heart. Some people's like, look, this happened. And He's like, oh, well, just went about His business.
One of the results in all that dirt and dust, it resulted in what they call brown lung disease.
Ouch.
The dust and stuff will get in their lungs and cause them to have, you know, it killed a lot of people.
We have a farm in Freon, and when we started doing this a few years ago, I made my cousin start setting our property out on the 7th year, and then afterwards he's farmed 50 years. He said, "That's the best crops I've ever had."
Mhm.
And I said, "Well, you know, it's biblical. It tells us to do that." He said, "Well, there is something to those old ways."
Now, the guy who designed it might know how it works.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and your land was blessed
Yes.
because you.
But your grandfather did.
Yeah, my grandfather did rest the land.
Sweet.
Yeah, he always did, and so that's why I remembered it too.
All right. According to the sages, I know we all pay deep attention to the sages, right? According to the sages, what year was the first Shemitah?
No.
14 years after. I don't know either. It's coming from the
Says
sages.
you've got notes
I don't
there.
read them. 14 years after the conquest by Joshua, the people were in complete control of the land, and therefore the first sabbatical rest for the land occurred 7 years later.
That makes sense.
What should be done on a Shemitah year?
No silence. Just
Study
rest.
Torah.
Study Torah.
Yeah. Any action that shows ownership of the land, locking the gates of your farm, and collection of debts. What happened if a Shemitah was not observed as God commanded?
Yeah.
We were just
That's-
speaking that. The crops wouldn't come up so much.
Well, and they ended up in exile for
Yeah.
not
Mm-hmm.
being
And he got
obedient.
all those back. That's the 70 years they had
Yeah.
to stay. It was to pay back all
So
of
it's
those.
like 1 or 70. Let's try one.
And the people would eventually be exiled from the land. That's in 2 Chronicles 36:21. The 70 years of Babylonian captivity were punishment for the 70 Shemitah Israel failed to keep from the time they entered the land to the destruction of the first temple, 490 years. During captivity, God caused the land to receive its appropriate rest by remaining desolate for 70 years. How important is the idea of the sabbatical year or the sabbatical to you? In what ways do you observe time and rest, trust God's provision in your life?
Shabbat.
Shabbat. Has any of y'all ever looked at the paleo Shabbat? Kind of like lead by the hand of the house. The sheen is 2 front teeth, so it's eat or consume, can be destroyed, but I don't think that's on the Sabbath, right? But eat or consume. And then you have the bet, which is a house again, right? And the tav, which is a mark or a covenant, right? So when we come together on Shabbat and we're taking the covenant into the family, that's what I got out of that one. Last weekend in Amor, the Torah commanded we counted 49 days leading from Passover to the holiday of Shavuot, Feast of Weeks. And in Behar, the Torah commands that we count 49 years leading to Yovel, the Jubilee year. What's the differences and the similarities between these two?
Between what?
The difference in between the similarities between the Yovel or Jubilee and Shavuot.
I had that in my 49.
I think mainly the only difference is
Days and
days and years, and then he's always teaching us, right? So I think if we were to just set for the length of time it takes to try to count years and all that, not seeing that pattern every year, I think we might get a little rusty on that, which we already have as a world today. Those that are hungrier after it, and others maybe not so much. In Leviticus 25:38, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan, and to be your God. The Midrash interprets this to mean that those who live outside the land of Israel are as if they had no God. Indeed, many laws of the Torah can only be observed in the land while living in the land of Israel among the Jewish community. There's another discussion here, but we're probably running a little long on time. With number 5, or did I miss one? Oh, number 5.
This one.
If you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments and do them, then I will give you rains in their season, and the land will yield its increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. Your threshing shall last to the time of the grape harvest, and the grape harvest shall last to the time of the sowing. And you shall eat your bread to the full, and dwell in the land securely. I will give peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none shall make you afraid. And I will remove harmful beasts from the land, and the sword shall not go through your land. You shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by the sword. 5 of you shall chase 100, 100 shall chase 10,000, and your enemies shall fall before you by the sword. I will turn to you and make you fruitful and multiply you, and will confirm my covenant with you. You shall eat old store long kept, and you shall clear out the old to make way for new. I will make my dwelling among you, and my soul shall not abhor you. And I will walk among you, and will be your God, and you shall be my people. I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, that you should not be their slaves. And I have broken the bars of your yoke that made you walk erect. But if you will not listen to me, and will not do all these commandments, if you spurn my statutes, if your soul abhors my rule, so that you will not do my commandments, but break my covenant, then I will do this to you. I will visit you with panic, with wasting disease, and fever that consume the eyes and make the heart ache. And you shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemy shall eat it. I will set my face against you, and you shall be struck down before your enemies. Those who hate you shall rule over you, and shall flee when none pursues you. And if in spite of this you will not listen to me, then I will discipline you again sevenfold for your sins. And I will break the pride of your power, and I will make heavens like iron, and your earth like bronze. And your strength shall be spent in vain. For your land shall not yield its increase, and the trees of the land shall not yield their fruit. Then if you walk contrary to me, and will not listen to me, I will continue striking you sevenfold for your sins. And I will let loose the wild beasts against you, which shall bereave you of your children, and destroy your livestock, and make you few in number, so that your roads shall be deserted. And if by this discipline you are not turned to me, but walk contrary to me, then I also will walk contrary to you. And I myself will strike you sevenfold for your sins. And I will bring sword upon you that shall execute vengeance for the covenant. And if you gather within your cities, I will send pestilence among you, and shall be delivered into the hand among you, and you shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy. When I break your supply of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in a single oven, and shall dole out your bread again by weight, and you shall eat and not be satisfied. But if in spite of this you will not listen to me, but walk contrary to me, then I will walk contrary to you in fury, and I myself will discipline you sevenfold for your sins. You shall eat the flesh of your sons, and you shall eat the flesh of your daughters, and I will destroy your high places, and cut down your incense altars, and cast your dead bodies upon the dead bodies of your idols, and my soul will abhor you. And I will lay your cities waste, and will make your sanctuaries desolate, and I will not smell your pleasing aromas. And I myself will devastate the land, so that your enemies who settle in it shall be appalled at it. And I will scatter you among the nations, and I will unsheath the sword after you, and your land shall be a desolation, and your cities shall be a waste. Then the land shall enjoy its Sabbath as long as it lies desolate, while you are in your enemy's land. Then the land shall rest and enjoy its Sabbath. As long as it lies desolate, it shall have rest, the rest that it did not have on your Sabbaths when you were dwelling in it. And as for those who are left, I will send faintness into their hearts in the lands of their enemies. The sound of a driven leaf shall put them to flight, and they shall flee as one flees from the sword, and they shall fall when none pursues. They shall stumble over one another as if to escape a sword, though none pursues. And you shall have no power to stand before your enemies, and you shall perish among the nations, and the land of your enemies shall eat you up. And those of you who are left shall rot away in your enemies' lands because of their iniquity. And also because of the iniquities of their fathers, they shall rot away like them. But if they confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers in their treachery that they committed against me, and also walking contrary to me, so that I walked contrary to them, and brought them into the land of their enemies, if then their uncircumcised heart is humbled, and they make amends for their iniquity, then I will remember my covenant with Yaakov, and I will remember my covenant with Isaac, and I will remember my covenant with Abraham, and I will remember the land. But the land shall be abandoned by them, and enjoy its Sabbath, while it lies desolate without them. And they will make amends, and they shall make amends for their iniquity, because they spurned my rules, and their soul abhorred my statutes. Yet for all that, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not spurn them, neither will I abhor them, so as to destroy them utterly, and break out my covenant for them, for I am Yahweh their God. But I will, for their sake, remember the covenant with their forefathers, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt in the sight of the nations, that I might be their God. I am Yahweh. These are the statutes and rules and laws that Yahweh made between himself and the people of Israel through Moshe on Mount Sinai. All right. What's the Hebrew word for statute? It's hok, meaning a decree, inscribed without a reason. So those commandments that we don't quite understand, they're hok or hokim. What's the Hebrew word for commandment? Mitzvah, from zva, meaning to instruct or to command. A mitzvah is a divine commandment. What's the central meaning to the Shema?
Teach it.
The Shema, what's the start with? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. What does it mean to walk in God's statutes and guard his commandments?
Obedient and don't change them.
Working hard to study the Torah. We should study the Torah and scriptures, study to show ourselves approved, correct?
I think it's similar to study to show ourselves approved, so we can teach others,
So we can walk in.
and we can walk in it.
So something I think is a theme that runs through this Parasha as well, is when it was talking about hiring slaves and whatnot, right? In Egypt, when Israel was in Egypt, if God did not intervene, what was happening to them while they were in Egypt?
They were becoming part of that system.
They were becoming Egyptians. So I think part of hiring foreigners in is that they live with your family and they learn how to walk in his way, that they become assimilated over time. Being a light to the nations. You wouldn't mind reading number 6, would you, Sharon?
I don't think I'd mind, except I've got to find it. Oh, there it is. It's hidden away. Yahweh spoke. Now? Ready?
Yes,
Set,
ma'am.
go? Okay.
I was just making sure it was short so you didn't kill me.
Well, look how Paul has survived lengthy ones for many years.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, if anyone makes a special vow to Yahweh involving the valuation of persons, then the valuation of a male from 20 years old up to 60 years old shall be 50 shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. If the person is a female, the valuation shall be 30 shekels. If the person is from 5 years old to 20 years old, the valuation shall be for a male 20 shekels, and for a female 10 shekels. If the person is from a month old up to 5 years old, the valuation shall be for a male 5 shekels of silver, and for a female the valuation shall be 3 shekels of silver. And if the person is 60 years old or over, then the valuation for a male shall be 15 shekels, and for a female 10 shekels. And if someone is too poor to pay the valuation, then he shall be made to stand before the priest, and the priest shall value him. The priest shall value him according to what the vower can afford. If the vow is an animal that may be offered as an offering to Yahweh, all of it that he gives to Yahweh is holy. He shall not exchange it or make a substitute for it, good or bad for good. And if he does in fact substitute one animal for another, then both it and the substitute shall be holy. And if it is any unclean animal that may not be offered as an offering to Yahweh, then he shall stand by the animal before the priest, and the priest shall value it as either good or bad. As the priest values it, so it shall be. But if he wishes to redeem it, he shall add a fifth to the valuation. Am I still going?
Yes.
When a man dedicates his house as a holy gift to Yahweh, the priest shall value it as either good or bad. As the priest values it, so shall it stand. And if the donor wishes to redeem his house, he shall add a fifth to the valuation price, and it shall be his.
When a man consecrates by a vow, the Levitical code deals with dedicatory gifts and offerings consecrated for the sanctuary. They are considered most holy. Verse 28, to the Lord, and must be rendered to the service of God. Ecclesiastes 5:4-6. When you vow a vow to God, do not delay in paying it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Let not your mouth lead you to sin, and do not say before the messenger that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry at your voice and destroy the work of your hand? Some of the questions I keep hearing or running into in this one is the difference of prices for men and women, and children and older people. Haven't been able to run all those down, but it seems like the fruits and the youth, or the strong years, the fruits that they could put out is what is being valued, not necessarily the person, but the opportunities of the fruits that they have to put out. All right, number 7. If a man dedicates to Yahweh part of the land that is his possession,
Blessings on all of you.
Thank you, Lord.
drive safe.
I gotta take care of grandkids.
What Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
May they put a smile on your face.
Yes.
That's what grandkids are for, right? If a man dedicates to Yahweh part of the land that is his possession, then the valuation shall be in proportion to its seed. A homer of barley seed shall be valued at 50 shekels of silver. If he dedicates his field from the year of Jubilee, to the valuation shall stand. But if he dedicates his field after the Jubilee, then the priest shall calculate the price according to the years that remain until the year of Jubilee, and a deduction shall be made from the valuation. And if he who dedicates the field wishes to redeem it, then he shall add a fifth to its valuation price, and shall remain his. But if he does not wish to redeem the field, or if he has sold the field to another man, it shall not be redeemed any more. But if the field, when it is released in the Jubilee, shall be a holy gift to Yahweh, like a field that has been devoted. But the priest shall be in possession of it. If he dedicates to Yahweh a field that he has bought, which is not part of his possession, then the priest shall calculate the amount of valuation for it up to the year of Jubilee, and the man shall give the valuation on that day as a holy gift to Yahweh. In the year of Jubilee, the field shall return to him from whom it was bought, to whom the land belongs as a possession. Every valuation shall be according to the shekel of the sanctuary. 20 gerahs shall make a shekel. But a firstborn of animals, which as a firstborn belongs to Yahweh, no man may dedicate, whether ox or sheep, it is Yahweh's. And if it is unclean animal, then he shall buy it back at the valuation, and add a fifth to it. Or if it is not redeemed, it shall be sold at the valuation. Excuse me. But no devoted thing that a man devotes to Yahweh of anything that he has, whether man or beast, or of his inherited field, shall be sold or redeemed. Every devoted thing is most holy to Yahweh. No one devoted who is to be devoted for destruction from mankind shall be ransomed. He shall surely be put to death. Every tithe of the land, whether seed of the land or fruit of the trees, is Yahweh's. It is holy to Yahweh. If a man wishes to redeem some of his tithe, he shall add a fifth to it. And every tithe of herds and flocks, every 10th animal of that passed under the herdman's staff, shall be holy to Yahweh. One shall not differentiate between good or bad, neither shall he make a substitute for it. And if he does substitute for it, then both it and the substitute shall be holy. It shall not be redeemed. These are the commandments that Yahweh commanded Moses for the people of Israel on Mount Sinai. According to Jewish tradition, how many blessings does one get if they study Torah? 22. The letters of the alphabet, from Aleph to Tav. I think was watching a little bit of Brad Scott trying to brush up on this, and he every time he does a Torah portion, he tells you how many standalone Aleph Tavs there are. And I know in Behar there's 7 standalone Aleph Tavs. Couldn't find how many, and didn't count them in Behar-Bechukoai. What is customary to do before and after you're reading the book of Torah? It's customary to kiss it. Show your love for the scroll. Yeah. What are some of the blessings that God promises if we learn and keep the Torah and His commandments?
It will go well with us. It's prosperity, security. I mean, just different things He says.
You listen to most of them. Peace and prosperity, bountiful crops, security and protection from our enemies, fruitful family life, and best of all, we are promised God's presence will dwell among us. Can you guys list the Parasha portions of Vayikra? Me either, but Paul's got it written down.
Yeah.
All right, you have the beginning of it, Vayikra, he called, and he called. Sav, command. Shemini, 8. Tazria, she conceives. Metzora, leper or diseased. Achrimot, after the death. Kedoshim, the holy ones. Emor, speak. Behar, on the mountain, today. And Bechukoai, in my statutes. So, seen this in some other rabbinical stuff and other people talking, but he has, the sages said, and Alvin was hitting on bread today, so this is fortuitous.
Fortuitous.
Well, I got to get some.
Big words.
Got to get some big
Yeah.
words in there somewhere. All right. If there is no bread, there is no Torah. If there is no Torah, there is no bread. Our Torah portion this week begins. If you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments and do them, then I will give you your rains in their seasons, and the land shall yield its increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. Your threshing shall last to the time of the grape harvest, and the grape harvest shall last to the time of the sowing. And you shall eat your bread to the full and dwell in your land securely. Though Torah study may not literally bake bread, it provides the means by which bread itself will have a real significance to us. So we already all know who the true bread is, right?
Yes, sure.
which to me, again, right straight out of Alvin's today, something that if you believe Moses, you would believe me, for Moses wrote of me. John 5:46. I mean, that takes a whole, just brings it up. And he said, I am the bread that came down from heaven, John 6:41. I am the bread of life, John 6:48. Something we can notice in these Torah portions is a small summary of how blessings if you do, curses if you don't work. Restated, if we treat the land and our neighbors the way our Creator designed them, it'll go well for us. At the end of Parasha Bechukoai, as with every other parasha that includes the book of the Torah, we say, Zak Kazak Benit Kazak. Now ready? Kazak Kazak Benit Kazak. Be strong, and may we be strengthened. Lamentations 3:25. Yahweh is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. Something that kind of hit me a little while ago with Scripture and how it works. Just a real super basic thing of how Scripture works, and something I noted. I'll just read the Scripture. For when the horses of Pharaoh with his chariots and horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought back the waters of the sea upon them, so that the people of Israel walked on dry land in the midst of the sea. So the same waters that was salvation for Israel was destruction for chariots of the people with hardened hearts coming after them, right? And I think that in that you see a little bit of this. The heart of the man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. As people read the Bible, they read it the way they want to read it. If they want to justify their lifestyle, they tend to do that, and we're seeing that all over the place today. But the punishments and stuff, as we've seen today for disobedience, they're there.
Proverbs 21:31 says, "The man prepares the horse. Man prepares for the day of battle, and the Lord
Victory
prepares the
belongs
horse."
to the Lord. I have it on my trailer,
The
my
victory
horse
belongs to the
trailer.
Yeah.
I just remembered about a horse. That was cool.
And I think all of that right there puts in action what you see in Hebrews 4:12. For the word of the Lord is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul, the spirit of joints of marrow, and discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. I think as we read the Bible and take action out of it, the thoughts and intentions of our heart come out in our fruits, and that shows exactly that's working. And he did give us some Calvin. I'm glad to see you're doing your homework. How is your math class going now? I'm doing great. How great? Real great. Have you been passing all your quizzes? I didn't say phenomenal. Yeah, know what words mean, right?
Big words.
All right, for next week, Bamidbar, we begin a new book of the Torah, Numbers, in the wilderness. I apologize, you guys can see the little guy up there. Paul's have to give props to Paul's Mac. It'll put a picture up there, and I haven't figured out how to do that on this one, which is helpful to some people. Trust me. Me and my face for radio. All right, let's say the blessing. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth, Yeshua Messiah, and life everlasting, set in our midst. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of Torah. And in Hebrew, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher etzanu Toret emet Yeshua Meshikenu v'kai olam natah v'tekenu Baruch atah Adonai notain ha-Torah. That's it.